On today's Toy Spot, we're going to be having a look at the Spider-Man from the Marvel Legends Sinister 6 box set. This is probably one of the nicest paint-wise of a Spider-Man figure that I've seen. I would say the only exception to it is probably the new Spider-Man Classics Spider-Man. I find between the sculpt and the paint scheme, he probably is the nicest Spider-Man figure to this day. But having said that, though, this figure does stand up rather well for how old this figure is. I'm not entirely a fan of the mask. I always would have liked it if the eyes themselves were just a tad lower and more on an angle. And I'm really a fan of the McFarlane Spider-Man, so anything that looks like the McFarlane Spider-Man, the way he drew it with the larger eyes and everything else, big fan of that. But this figure, though, paint-wise, is really, really nice. They've thrown a lot of muscle on this guy. Look at the muscles on this guy. Not really what I would consider to be Spider-Man, but nonetheless, a good sculpt on it. In the way of articulation, he has free range in his neck, both in his neck and his head. He has what you don't see too often anymore is he's got the shoulder articulation, the ball joint in his shoulder, as well as the shoulder itself. He's got a ball joint. So between those two, you actually get quite a range of movement. He has articulation in the forearm as well as the elbow here, articulation in the hand, and there's articulation in the fingers. There is articulation in the torso, but I find a lot of times when you put the articulation in the torso, you end up getting a figure that's really loose. He has articulation in the waist, the legs, the knees, you know, all the stuff you would normally find. Speaking of the looseness, though, I mean, I find this figure is a tad loose in the foot as well as in the leg area, especially this leg. Not so much this leg, but I find this leg is really loose. They've also given him the webbing on it, which I'm not a big fan of. I might just take it right off. But webbing aside, and the fact that the figure is loose, overall I am really happy with the figure. The figure is, despite the fact it came in a box set, usually they always throw a really, I was gonna swear there. Usually they give you a really crappy Spider-Man if they're gonna throw it into a box set, and I would have to say that despite the fact that this is part of a set, this Spider-Man actually holds up really well. He does only have one accessory, and the fact that these accessories, or the fact that these figures are in a set, you're not going to get a lot in the way of accessories. But he also does come with a stand. Very reminiscent of the classic Spider-Man comics symbol, where it had a circle and it was filled in and it had his face with the mask. That's really nice, and I would almost say this figure needs it the way he's a bit loose. He definitely will need the stand. But as the first figure in the 7 figures I'm going to be reviewing of the Sinister 6 set, definitely a nice, good start, I would say. Really happy with the Spider-Man figure. There you have a Toy Spot on the Sinister 6 box set from Marvel Legends. And there we had Spider-Man. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.